Okay?
Can you see it?
Yes. And then I'll just tell you when I want the next one. Is that how you want to do it?
Let's do that.
Okay. Today we're going to see an overview of Jeremiah. I can only give you highlights because it's a really big book in the Bible, and there's a wonderful images in there, wonderful stories to read. So the ones I'm giving you today are just a little bit of all of the stories in there. So I'm hoping that it'll tempt you to go look at the book and read everything else or some of the other stories that are really great. So why am I starting with a volcano? Well, to be truthful, I'm really not sure, but I thought of Jeremiah and then I thought of a volcano. And I found this really good writing on volcanoes from National Geographic. So really we're going to start first with that. Volcanoes are Earth's geologic architects. They've created more than 80% of our planet's surface, laying the foundation that has allowed life to thrive. Their explosive force crafts mountains as well as craters. Lava rivers spread into bleak landscapes. But as time ticks by, the elements break down these volcanic rocks, liberating nutrients from their stony prison and creating remarkably fertile soils that have allowed civilization to flourish. And it reminded me of Jeremiah's story today because it encompasses the violence of war, the uprooting of the Judean nation, but also a hope for a future, which includes replanting of God's people. Jeremiah lived out surviving on the edge of a volcano. Even in the calmest times, prophets performed hard tasks. During this time period, Jeremiah is both God's spokesperson, but he's also a part of the suffering community. And this is what makes him unique among all the prophets. He is not just talking about what's going on and telling the people what God's telling him, but he's also living it. And you feel his suffering, you feel his pain, along with the community. Next slide, please. So did the prophet write the book? When was the book of Jeremiah written? Scrolls of Jeremiah and the literary styles within the book. The literary consensus seems to be that there was a historical prophet named Jeremiah, and that portions of the book probably were written by him and or his scribe Baruch, which consisted of scrolls. However, this book went through several extensive redactions, or what we would call editings, in the exile and post-exile periods, which added material and altered the wording of Jeremiah's scrolls, or his sermons are also called that. Therefore, his original scrolls are beyond identifications. The book has both narrative and poetic sections. These sections are encountered in both the prose and the sermon portions of the book. Most of the redactions are from the Deuteronomic school, and they were done in phases. And the book kept being added onto by these redactors. So the original ending for Jeremiah was chapter 25, verse 13. But then another bit of material was added, and it went to chapter 45. And then it finally came to the ending of what we now have at chapter 51, verse 64. But after the exile, there was still editing done on the book and throughout the book. This text has both a Greek and Hebrew textual tradition. Both traditions were confirmed among the Hebrew biblical texts found at Qumran in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, scholars have suggested that this book could be divided into two parts that are distinguishable. chapters 1 through 25, which talks about the disaster that is coming, and the second part, which extends from chapter 26 to 52, entitled Living Beyond the Disaster. And you'll see that when I talk in different stories today about the book. So can we look at the next slide? Now here you're going to see a historical time period of Jeremiah, and that's because I want you to see what part of history of the Judean nation that this occurs in, what part of their history. However, when you read the book, it wasn't written, it was written at different times with different parts. So if you start reading this book, you're going to see, wait, this was the time period before the other one, even though I'm reading a story that should be consecutive. That just does not occur in this book. Now, I'm going to start with Assyria. Assyria was a great military threat in the period just prior to Jeremiah's time. Judea survived as a puppet kingdom, a satellite of Assyria, by paying protection money and erecting Assyrian altars in the temple area of Jerusalem. And erecting these altars really became one of the focal points of exile, because these were altars to other gods, and worship was occurring to the other gods as well as the true God at the same time in the temple area. Then King Josiah came along, and at the same time, Assyria became a weaker power, which would in the future be defeated by Babylon. But what was important about King Josiah is that he sponsored a renovation of the temple, and a scroll was discovered. And that scroll was purported to be the words of Moses to Israel. The king introduced religious reforms based on the discovered scrolls. And all the religious observance outside of Jerusalem were forbidden. The priests of those various centers were organized to take their turn in officiating at the sacrifices in Jerusalem. The festival of Passover was reinstituted. However, King Josiah made one big mistake. He felt that when Egypt was threatening, that he should go out and do battle with them. He died during that battle. And so his two sons reigned for a period of time, but they never really grasped hold of the throne. So the next king in the saga is King Jehoiakim. I haven't seen that right. And during this time, Judah actually does become a vassal of Egypt. The king taxed the people in order to pay the tribute to Egypt. In addition, he began a building project for a new palace, using the citizens of Judea for workers. Once again, worship of other gods within the temple area became popular. Again, something Jeremiah talks again and again about, that God is very upset about this. When we look at Jeremiah, we don't see a strict linear show of his life. Like I said, chapters are interspersed here and there to go back and forth in history. But the one thing I'd like you to look at here is they talk about him being, the son of one of the priests. And one of my sources talk about the fact that this was probably instrumental in his young childhood, because he was growing up at the time of the reform of King Josiah, and his father would have come back to Jerusalem and worked within the temple area. Can I have the next slide? Next slide.
Yeah.
So when we look at Jeremiah, we're really looking a little bit at Moses, no, a lot at Moses. Jeremiah thought his call came from a reading in Deuteronomy 18:18. I will rise up for them a prophet like you from among their own people. I will put my words in the mouth of the prophet, who shall speak to them everything that I command. And this was written during the time of Moses and his tradition. I guess, again, we see the Deuteronomic writers having a part of this writing because, of course, it was from Deuteronomy and the law was important to them. But when we look at Moses and Jeremiah together, we see that Moses, as a child, he had that call because he was put in the basket and he went to Egypt and he went out. But that call really started from his childhood. And we see the same thing with Jeremiah in his writings. He talks about, as he reflects back, most likely, he talks about he feels he had that call from his earliest infancy, even though probably it came more from his time, that time period when Josiah reformed the temple. And it's interesting that during that time period of reform, Jeremiah did not have any prophecies. It only came when the other kings came on board and they went back to the temple worship of the idols. But he really felt that he was an anti-Moses. And the reason he felt that was because Moses led the people into Egypt, and eventually there they got God's covenant, became God's covenant people, and they received the law. But Jeremiah ended up in exile, as did some of the people who didn't go to Babylon. They ended up in exile in Egypt. So he was leading them the other way. And they would lose that covenant, mainly, basically. And he would say, because of that God's name no longer should be pronounced on the lips of his people. Hear God saying that within Jeremiah. However, we feel that something else is going to occur at the very end, and we're going to talk about it in a bit. We feel that there's this piece of hope. And this piece of hope, though not stated in any terms, is really kind of a shadow of the new covenant. So really Jeremiah is the bridge leading them into a new covenant. And Moses was the beginning of the old covenant. So you see how a bit of how the Old Testament and the New Testament merges together within the story of Jeremiah. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. Now, I know you're wondering, why are we looking at Psalm 1? Well, I'm going to start looking about different aspects of Jeremiah. And the first thing I'm going to look about is his prayer. Psalm 1 is a wonderful prayer about those that are happy because they delight in the law of the Lord, and they are like trees planted by streams of water. They blossom, they flow, they prosper. And the wicked are like chaff, and chaff are things that have no land, and the wind drives them away. The way of the wicked will perish. Well, let's look at another version of this. It's a reversal of Psalm 1. And this is what Jeremiah prayed. You will be in the right, O Lord, if I make claim against you. Yet I shall present charges against you. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why are the workers of treachery at ease? You have planted them and they have taken root. They spread. They even bear fruit. You are present in their mouths, but far from their thoughts. Jeremiah has actually taken Psalm 1 and brought it into the prayer of his time. And for me to read this, it was like, wow, because we pray the Psalms and we bring them into our time period. And we see that someone from all this time past has actually done this. And I also wanted to mention that he prays a lot in what's called confessions. In the book it'll talk and I'll have sections about confessions. Well, those are his prayers, his lamentations. Thank you. And actually, it was once thought that he wrote Lamentations in the Bible, but he did not, according to scholars. So he has taken this prayer and totally changed it around, but he has made it a part of him. He is a prophet who makes his sorrow and everything a part of him. And he has taken the psalm and made that a part of him and what his people are. Next slide, please. So I'm getting here into one of the stories about Jeremiah, and it's called Prophet Against Prophet. Now, there was a story of a false prophet, Hananiah, which occurred during the reign of King Zedekiah. Zedekiah. Jeremiah had counseled the king not to join a proposed rebellion against Babylon, declaring that this would be against the purposes of God. Jeremiah, to enforce his action, put on a wooden yoke bar. In other words, he is actually acting out what he believes his message is. And what he was implying was the inevitability of Judah's continued subservience to Babylon. Well, a prophet named Hananiah came along, and he had a conflicted message. He assured the king that the yoke of Babylon would be broken within 2 years, and that the sacred temple vessels would be returned by Babylon. And Hananiah reinforced his message with a dramatic action of his own. He took the wooden yoke bar from Jeremiah's neck and he broke it. And this confused Jeremiah because he really felt this assurance from God, but the fact that Hananiah had done this action, and it kind of put him off, and he wasn't sure. But there was this assurance that if Hananiah's message was right, that this would occur, which it didn't. And because he was a false prophet, he had a subsequent early death in his life. Apparently that was proof of false declarations. And this taps again into a verse in Deuteronomy 18:20. The prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet will die. Written after the actual events, remember this was done in post-exile period. This was further light that on the belief that Zedekiah's faithful rebellion against Babylon was something done in his own way for him, not for others. And this was a way of blaming him for that action. It was believed. Next, if I could have the next slide. So now we're going to clay pots, which is another story in Jeremiah that's really beautiful in some ways. It says, "O house of Israel, can I not deal with you like this potter, says the Lord? Just like clay in the hands of the potter, so are you in my hands, O house of Israel." So God tells Jeremiah to visit a potter's house, and he notes that the potter is working with clay for a pot. And the imagery between the potter working the clay and God fashioning human lives was an ancient and familiar one. Remember in Genesis 2:7, it talks about fashioning Adam. And it's really beautiful for us as Christians, because if you've ever heard or sang Abba Father, it's where we claim that God is the potter and we are the clay, and that he's molding us and making us into his. But unfortunately, the image in this text that Jeremiah is developing is to demonstrate that the destruction of the kingdom of Judah can properly be understood as the work of God. So in other words, God can make you as clay and he can break you. And that the potter's action is a symbol of the action of God. And Jeremiah noted that after the original pot was spoiled, it was reworked into another vessel. One might discern from this a positive message of hope, that God might begin to refashion his people anew. Again, is this a bridge into the new covenant from the old covenant? The next story about the son of the broken pot is, in this section, Jeremiah negotiates the purchase of the earthen pot to take it along to what's called the potsherd gate. And he's going to declare the word of God there. And what's interesting also about this section is he declares it to the people, not just to the priest or to the king. Usually he just talked to the priest or the king, or the hierarchy in Judea, about the conversations he had with God and God's proclamations to them. But here, actually, the people are involved too. Now, this location was where the shards of pottery were piled in heaps. It was thought to have been close to the area where the potter worked. Jeremiah was commanded by God to smash the pot before the people. This action was a dramatic gesture indicating the violence of the divine coming to Israel. The people were to be broken into pieces so that the covenant nor they could never be mended. In a way, this was saying the old covenant was to be totally broken and a new one would occur. It was also a visual impact to give them a feeling that they would become exiles, and that the temple would be burned. And so he was giving a visual sign of that, symbolizing a broken clay pot. Next. Thank you. Now we go through all of these things with Jeremiah, and he's giving all these sad and sorrowful proclamations that they're going to go into exile, that God's going to break up Judah, that the temple is going to be destroyed, and different images. And then all of a sudden, we get to this story. After 12 years of preaching everything kind of sad, this story becomes a message of hope. And it becomes a message of hope when Jeremiah was asked to buy a field. And to me, this seemed like a really strange story, because here by this time, people knew that they were going to be exiled. I don't go into the two guarding of Jeremiah's in the cisterns, ground, jail type area, which I'm sure you've probably heard. But he was in one of those when this event occurred. So to me, it was like, why would he even consider buying land? But in Jeremiah 32, a cousin asked him why he's being held under guard for financial help in keeping ownership of a field within the family. Now, the law in Leviticus 25:25 states that in the event property was in danger of being sold outside the family, it was the duty of a near relative to prevent the sale. Now, since both Jeremiah and his cousin would be exiled in Egypt, this purchase seems a bit useless. However, one source suggested that since Jeremiah seemed to be isolated from his family most of his life, that he buys this property to kind of reconcile in the end with his family. Jeremiah probably felt the purchase of the field was perceived to be God's initiative. He feels that God is saying that those in exile will be replanted back home in their future. They will come back to Judea. This was not the end of it. This was of a temple. Maybe there would be a new temple. So this message of hope is a total turnaround from God. And it was really a surprise to Jeremiah, because he really felt that his message would not be a good message, and that the sorrow and suffering would continue on. But having this message of hope gave Jeremiah some hope that maybe he wasn't the anti-Moses, maybe he was a restructuring of Moses, but he was the type of Moses. Next slide. Now, these are the words by Jeremiah to those in exile with him in Egypt. Because you burned incense and sinned against the Lord and did not obey the Lord, and because you did not follow his teaching, his laws, and his exhortation, therefore this disaster has befallen you, as is still the case. The exiles were still worshiping other gods when they went into exile, and it highlights the fact that they see the reform and death of King Josiah in different ways. And it's interesting because here they are in exile. We passed the time of them going through everything they went through to get to exile, and they're still arguing with Jeremiah. There's still this talking. There's still what's going to happen next. And I like this because it gives us a view of what they did talk about when they were exiled. Jeremiah's view was that when King Josiah reformed the idol worship, the exiles still took a chance of survival. But when the reforms lapsed, there was nothing but disaster, and that's why they went into exile. But the other people viewed the fact that he went into battle with Egypt, and if that had not occurred, perhaps they would not have ended up in exile. And there's still this hope for a new covenant within this time period, because in the very chapter and 31, which is before this, it talks about God will inscribe his teachings on the hearts of his people. So in the end, Jeremiah and Moses are still kind of together as prophets, because when Jeremiah died, no one knew where he was buried, and the same with Moses. And Jeremiah died in Egypt, so he never returned, as far as I know, back to Judea. He never got back to his promised land, just like Moses never got to the promised land. And in ending this brief overview, I want to say that I had a type of admiration for the character of Jeremiah. He always believed in and did as God told him. He was bold enough to question God, and he never gave up on God's message or on his people. And I feel that the people that all the editors and first that were Jeremiah and others, they did just a beautiful job on this book, because you just get a feel for different parts of it. And I would like to end this part of it by saying that Kathleen O'Connor, in her book on Jeremiah, says, Jeremiah's God desires love. Jeremiah's God desires love, gives love, brings new life, and reimagines the nation. So God was still with the people. He was still going to take care of them, but he had new directions in mind for them. I'm ready for the next slide. I put the reading resources in here. They're also in your handout, except for one of them. Your handout, you could have gotten on eNotes. If you were able to print it out. The first one, called Reading the Prophet in His Time and Ours, is an excellent book on getting an overview of Jeremiah, but also getting some important points on the different prayers he has, different readings within the book. By Kathleen O'Connor. It was written right after 9/11, right after Hurricane Katrina, and she talks about what people could have gone through during that time period and connects it with the pain that people go through in their lives, especially when they have a time that's disastrous like a war. And I would highly recommend this one, especially if you are a caregiver, because it really has some great stories, and it goes into Jeremiah in a wholly different way. Another one is the New Collegeville Commentary. We looked at that when we talked about Baruch. It has Jeremiah and Baruch, and it has the New American translation of the Bible, which you don't see as much, which is good. But in the bottom beneath that, it gives a brief commentary. It doesn't overwhelm you with commentary. It gives you an idea of what's happening in that section. I like it because sometimes the writing of Jeremiah itself is hard just to read it and figure out what they're trying to say. And this gives you a short commentary on sections. Also, the interpretation commentary, and that was not on the handout you got. I'm sorry, I didn't have that when I gave the handout to Joe, but it's called the Interpretation Commentary on Jeremiah by Clement. I really liked it because it put the sections together, like take the pottery shop visit and the breaking of the pot. It's not where you would think, oh, I need to go to the next chapter to get the rest of the story. But in this book on interpretation, it puts the stories together for you, so it's easier to understand what's going on together in sections. And my last suggestion is a Jewish study Bible, which was suggested by my Old Testament professor this last year. It's really great in that it gives you a direct translation from the Hebrew that's a little closer. But what I really like the best about it is that the side footnotes connect you to certain Jewish words and what they could mean for a spiritual look at. And also it connects you to other Old Testament stories, and you see how they're connected. And that concludes the, no, I'm sorry. Can I go to the next slide? Oops. I want to give you your this again was on my handout, Praying with the Book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah has really great verses and themes. Also, it's interesting for me in Jeremiah that God is always changing the agenda with him. First he takes him one place, then he takes him another. First he has sorrow, and then he has hope. So I think it's great to see how he prays, and one of that is by asking why. And that's a great way to start prayer with God sometimes, just to ask why and just sit there. For me, I sit there and wait for an answer, but not always getting that. But it's a great place to start and to get my frustrations out, because I can say, why is this occurring? And this isn't right, and whatever, I'm feeling at that time, and that kind of calms me down. So why is a great way to start a prayer. The last question was from Jeremiah reading the prophet. It says, God is constantly creating new patterns when the old ones have decayed. The book of Jeremiah challenges us to open our ears, heart, and mind to listen to God and respond. How is our life changing, and what could God be communicating to us within that change? And I know we're going through a time of change as a nation, but I think every day God changes things. And I think we have to be on the lookout for new patterns, not only just within a nation or with the church or whatever, within ourselves as well. God's changing us every day. We need to kind of take hold of that and try to figure out how God is changing. And that's another great way to start prayer, is say, God, what are you changing? Help me look and see what that is. And that is my last slide.
Okay.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yay.
Hey.
I didn't do any ending questions we can talk about. So if you want to talk about anything about Jeremiah, I don't know everything about it, but maybe we can talk to each other about something that rang a bell with us.
Oh, I'm not going to ask you any questions. You always ask me the hard ones in Bible study. And I have the internet to look them up the answers, But I think that's a really good overview. But I like your last question on, the last slide that's on your handout. It seems made for today, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
So, I can just go back there.
The last line.
The last slide.
The other direction.
Yeah, there we go.
There.
Other verses and themes.
What could God be up to? Because surely God is at work in even the horrific things that happen somehow. I remember vividly Chris Iannakis, I don't know if she's here, but Chris telling the story about doing godly play right after the awfulness earthquake that happened in Haiti. And she asked the children, about 4 or 5 years old, as I recall the story, where is God in all this? And one of the children who was drawing, what was happening, just looked up and said, God's in the rubble, and went back. That was a great answer, and that is where you gather up your hope.
God is in the what?
In the rubble.
Rubble. Oh, okay. Just like the volcano and what the volcano does to the land.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So where do we find God in Richmond and Atlanta and Missouri and all these places right now?
I asked you first.
Ask him back.
I
I
think-
have friends
I
in
think
Richmond that are kind of spooked right now. They've been up all night
Okay.
because of major stuff going on down there. And anyway.
Maureen wants to get in here.
Margaret Riccadelli, I think it was Margaret, put up some pictures yesterday on Facebook about what you're not going to see. And they were showing the people that came in Philadelphia, I think it was, that were cleaning up the glass and cleaning up the trash. And, you know, these are the people that want change, but they are.
Minneapolis.
Pardon?
That was Minneapolis.
Minneapolis.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yes.
Minneapolis, yeah.
Yeah, that, you know,
During the day.
that's where God was. He was in the people that were coming in and saying, this has happened, but we want our city and we're going to clean it up and take care of it.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I'm commenting because it's kind of the last half of Jeremiah 44:23. You did not follow his teachings, his laws, his exhortations. Therefore, this disaster has befallen you. That kind of feels like some people have lost the faith to me. So.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is, there's only one answer that works to all of that. And the answer for me is somebody named Kate Braestrip said it this way, but a lot of people have said it, is if you want to know where God is at work in any bad thing that's happening, look for the love. You know, look for the love, and that's where God is at work. And then it's a small step, or in some cases in my life, depending on my fear level, it could be a big step to being the love, you know? And then the question is, how can we here help anybody in Richmond? Well, there's a human bridge that goes between here and Richmond via love and prayer. And so I can reach out to everybody I know who I think might be hurting because of this and tell them I love them and that I'm with them and that they're not going to be in this alone, you know? And that's how what I can do. And if we all do it, there's a human shield, you know?
Joe, this is Judy. I was raised in Minneapolis during the late 40s and early 50s, and the schools in Minneapolis were integrated. And I was reading an article this morning about what changed in Minneapolis, and it sounded very progressive at the time that I was there. But what they did is that they didn't allow black people to own their own homes, their own property, about the mid-50s. And it sounds like things were progressive, and then they went backwards.
Right.
And they denied, and then they built highways that went right through historic black areas. And this didn't just happen in Minneapolis, it happened through cities throughout the United States. So what started out as a good idea changed because certain groups thought it would be a good idea to deny black people the right to own land, and then they took away their historic areas. So change went downhill, and this is what is being shown to us now about what happens when bad decisions are made that suppress people. And it's coming to light now.
I think you're right, Judy, and we have to acknowledge we benefited from that. We continue to benefit from that, and we have to draw a line wherever we stand in all of this and say, I recognize this isn't right, and I'm going to speak about it. I'm going to do something about it, you know? And what can we do? We can all pray. And there might be other stuff, you know, you can do too. But, you know, we have to acknowledge that there's some complicity here. You know, I have a better life than I should have in a way, because those laws that took property away from other people benefit.
That's so right, Joe. And
Yeah.
I was thinking about what,
Debbie?
yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I was thinking about what Linda said today about asking why when you begin to pray. And I cannot even describe the words that I feel and that my community feels, saying, why, God? Why have you let this go on for 400 years? Why are you letting this happen to us? And it's like I have a big load on my back that I've been trying to live and work and carry this forward. And then you see something like this,
Yeah.
and you know, for the 400 years, Lord, where are you? Why are you letting this keep happening? And I have to say, and I know I'm talking to the choir right now, it's white people that have to change this.
Yeah.
We are the oppressed. White people are the oppressors. Whether they want to not understand that they have privilege, like the girl who was calling on this Harvard graduated Black man, calling the police
Oh, yeah.
because he asked her to put her dog away in the bird watching area. Why, Lord? Why is this going on? We can't fix it. We're working hard and we can't fix it. And we're not the creator of the problem. White people are, and white people have to fix this problem.
Yeah.
But how do we
And-
do that in our current environment?
Well,
We
like
don't
I
have
said,
a leadership that is a top leadership that has any interest in helping anybody.
right,
It's who we
but the
elect. It's
problem
who
is-
we elect.
No, well, the answer starts right with each of us. Not,
Yes.
I mean, there's all that out there. What we're called to do is something we can do. And you got to figure out for yourself what it is you can do. And if nothing else, pray and let people who are hurting know that you got them covered. You know, you're with them. And then do something to be with them. You know, it's got to be us doing something, not waiting for somebody else to do something.
Yes.
Now, on the other hand, there are people who would disagree at, you know, what the answer is. So let them do what they think the answer is, and we do what we think the answer is and know the answer is. It always starts with us. That's my other sermon for today, I guess. But there are people who are hurting, and you know, I hope you heard the tone of her voice. You know,
Yeah.
she has a son, and I know there's fear in her heart for all of her children and all of her family, but that magnifies the problem. You know, and we all know somebody's son. Keep those phones and cameras handy.
Mm.
Mm.
That's what saved him. I mean,
Thank you,
that's-
Joe.
Well, I don't know. Let the love begin with us.
Yes.
Mhm.
And Lee, I know there are people in Richmond hurting, and we can affect Richmond. Starting right here. See what your question sparked, Linda?
Yes, I do.
A perfect question for the day.
Yeah.
Well, can I interject something that is not related to what we're talking about?
Yes.
Go for it.
My cousin Robert is home.
Yay!
Hey.
The one that spent 36 days in the hospital, including 24 on a ventilator.
Wow.
This is amazing. Keep praying and give
Okay.
thanks for that. Because
He had
I'm
a
sure he
3%
has some
chance of
recovering.
living. He had a 3% chance of living.
He's got
Wow.
some recovering to do,
All
but
right.
Yeah, he's
Keep
got
praying.
eight weeks of physical therapy coming up. Physical, speech,
All right.
and occupational.
Physical therapy is important.
Yeah. But thank you guys, because he's been on our prayer list, and I know your prayers have helped.
speaking of prayers, as I mentioned, today is Barbara Bishop's birthday.
Okay.
In her 90s. I don't keep track of how old you are after you turn 90. And she loves us and loves our community, and has been faithful in prayer, in support of our community. And she's dying. You know, she can't in any way receive letters or phone calls or cards, but she can receive prayers. And so I ask you to pray, not just for her in an outcome that's fitting for her, but that somehow she feels the love we have, you know, back to her, and give thanks for her, because she's been a big part of Church of the Resurrection. And she looks so forward to seeing that church that's being built completed.
She'll see it.
Did you see Flat Jesus there? You will if you haven't yet. He was on site yesterday. I sent it to our guy at AHC. He got a chuckle out of it this morning.
Eleonora had her hand up.
Oh. Nora's starting to walk, and I am starting tomorrow. Who's in this with us? I know Coral is. I know Maureen is. The Joneses. Are you guys in there, Susie? Yay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
let's make this happen.
Yeah, and you might have seen it if you've seen the e-notes kind of thing I put out last night. Clearly you have, because you're in this meeting. But, you know, Nora wants you to support her in addition to my support. So, you know, if you can do that, especially if you're not walking yourself, she would love to get your money. I'm hesitant to call it, we'll give it to Alive, but it's, you know, I promised Alive I wouldn't call it Alive Walk, but I call it Alt Walk, exclamation point, so you get the idea. The deal is that they closed their child development center for a year at least while they regroup. So, you know, it'll probably go to food support. But in any case, they need the money. So there you have it. I would love for you to walk with us, though. With us. Anybody else? I've got a history meeting in just a few minutes.
Yeah, Joe, Judy.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if some commendation could be done for us older people that can't walk as far. I mean,
Yes.
Ray and I walk every day, but we can't walk 5 miles a day, each one of us.
You tell us your goal, and you report your daily walk, steps or mileage, whatever, to Bob Barnett on Sunday every day, and we'll count it as if it were 10,000 steps. I'll certainly support you in that. So
Great.
You pick your goal. You know, I don't want to leave anybody out.
Okay.
Speaking of which,
Sounds good.
by the way, does anybody else want to, before I keep running my mouth?
Can't hear you.
I can't hear you.
Okay.
What'd you say?
I said, does anybody else want in here before I run my mouth? Because I've got to leave in a couple of minutes for a vestry meeting that's coming up at 12:15. I'll leave this in case you guys want to chat with each other, you know, coffee hour style and the like. But I started to write, you might have seen it in the regular e-notes this week, I started to write my thoughts about what might be coming for worship, but things are changing so rapidly, you know, in terms of the city. As I was writing it, somebody told me, one of my neighbors told me that the mayor of the city of Alexandria had just announced reopening the city. Well, obviously, there's the city, there's the state, there's the, you know, seminary, and then there's the bishop. So, you know, there's all those things. And the bottom line is, I don't want anybody to get the virus. And most of us are all in a high risk category of some kind or other. I'm just missed that, thank God.
Well, my son was, Ryan was in Old Town yesterday. It was his birthday. And a friend of his, a buddy of his, and he was down in the city in Old Town. And he said the mobs of people out. Yeah. There were so many people out mixing and mingling and walking around. So obviously probably not too many older people, and they were probably mostly younger people, but still it's of concern.
Yeah.
Be safe. But here's my thinking, du jour, okay? Because who knows what might happen today and tomorrow. but I've actually talked with Ian Markham, the dean of the seminary, and sort of asked him for permission. Should our bishop give permission, okay, for a possibility in the future? Have I caveated that enough?
Yes, you have.
Because the bishop says we have to be out of phase one, her phase one. It has to be 14 days in a row where the numbers are decreasing. That was for us,
Right.
the city of Alexandria, okay? And they're not. So, you know, when that is possible, I've asked him for permission to hold an outdoor worship service, okay, in either the old chapel grounds, you know, the one that burns
yeah.
as the altar, spilling out into what they call the grove, that big green area, you know, between the buildings. And he said, well, yes, but I want to talk to my senior leadership, okay? Because he's thinking about that for himself. And he wants to circle around with our bishop to make sure, you know, she's okay with it. Well, obviously, I told him to make sure and tell her I'm going to be asking her myself once I get permission from you. You know, and I have to go through a whole bunch of hoops that have yet to be defined, by the way, to get permission to do that. But I don't intend, the bottom line is, I don't think we're going to stop worshiping the way we did today for quite a while, if ever, okay? So I don't intend, if you hear about, you know, any kind of in-person worship service, socially distanced, singing, probably not singing, whatever it is, okay, we're going to continue to be safe and provide a safe option. Because I don't want anybody to, you know, get the virus. It could be catastrophic. So, you know, we're working on that. And Ian said, he probably will do the same thing for the August term, you know, for the students. Because he also said that Emmanuel on the Hill has requested his permission to record their worship service, you know, from Emmanuel Chapel. The whole other complicating layer is Emmanuel on the Hill. So I'm just telling you all of that, you know, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's happening that you'll be hearing this week, but you know, after we sort it out. But it's all working. And, you know, as long as we stay together as a community, and again, I give great thanks to our parish care team members and to you all, because it feels to me like we're together as a community. And, you know, as long as we worship, keep God at the center and do our missions, you know. And here's the tricky part. You guys are doing really well in terms of continuing financial support when you can for Church of the Resurrection. And I thank you for that, you know, because there are a lot of churches where people can't or aren't doing that. And I might as well tell you, even though I haven't formally pulled the vestry until a couple minutes from now, you know, we went ahead and canceled our Shrine Mount weekend this week because they needed to know, and it didn't seem viable or feasible given the work that Susie and Betsy did to find out from the people who were registered whether they would go, even if the pandemic were over, whatever that means, you know. And so few people wanted to go that it seemed prudent to cancel rather than try to reschedule, especially because there are a whole bunch of other big churches trying to reschedule for what they hope will be a very shortened season, you know, later in the year. So we got to think of something alternative to do safely as a community, and I'll let you start thinking about all of that. And since I got you, and I don't get an announcement, you know, opportunity, let me just tell you that this Saturday at 3:30 on Zoom, we're going to try to do a transition forum so we can talk about all of the things that we need to do between now and next spring to transition from the seminary back to our property. And I hope you'll join me. And I put it on Saturday at 3:30, hoping more people could participate in that. Zoom would be friendlier, you know, than trying to do it on Sunday when everybody's trying to worship. I do hope you will join us for that, if for no other reason than to see where we're thinking of using you if you're willing, you know. So you can swap out or trade out or bow out, whichever you want to do, you know. And we need you all. That's the bottom line, you know. And we can do this if we get everybody on board like we are so good at doing. And then I would be remiss if I didn't tell you two other events. This Thursday at 9 a.m., early in the morning, but after Bible study, I'm going to be blessing Louise Bennett's new home at Goodwin House. She's been patiently waiting. 9 o'clock, we're going to do a blessing. And she's excited about it, so am I, because we wouldn't be able to get many people in her new home, an apartment at Goodwin House. But now we can get a lot of people in there, sort of.
Everybody can come.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although it's early, but it'll be good. And then on the 20th of June, Elsa Wilson has made a most beautiful piece of art that our architects had already reserved space for, in our new building. We're going to unveil it on the 20th at 7 p.m. on Zoom. We'll have another sort of cocktail party and unveiling. And I'm thinking you'll want to be there for that for a whole variety of reasons, to see each other and the like, and the social aspect, see the artwork, praise
Can't
Elsa.
hear you.
And
Can't hear you.
you can't hear me? Listen up. and I'm thinking that the image in the art could be the basis for our new banner, which would explain why it's taken so long to come up with one. We've been waiting for this. So you just take a look. Anybody else before I leave? I'll leave you all.
No.
I just wanted to recognize the care team for their diligence and hard work to make sure that we have all the materials available for the worship service. Thank you all for the amazing job. And wow, what a great reading from Core today.
Oh, she did a great
The
job.
salad.
Sorry. I've known Cora his whole life. Old habits die hard. So, not only do we need to thank the care team, thank you, Eleanor, for that. I need to thank Dina Jaworski.
Yes.
What an incredible bunch of music. And the choir, and Kathy Graham, her tech skills are invaluable in making all this work. I want to publicly acknowledge Carol Sigley for the postlude. She wants to do a prelude, but I won't let her. A whole bunch of reasons. But I love that she's in the mix and that her talents and her music is there. And I have to thank, therefore, Dick DeMeester for making that possible. And my life certainly got better when Jonathan and Maya came back on board. Yeah, incredible. And I don't know if you know how long it takes to render and export video and even upload it these days with everybody working at home. He's a trooper and a keeper. So there you go. Thank you. I got to go, but I'll leave you to chat with each other.
I'm gonna leave it right there.
I'm gone.
I think I'm leaving also.
Take care.
I'm going.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Get on to the meeting, the vestry meeting. I have to get into onto my. Oh, okay. So I'll just get off. Sign into my. Okay, I'll get out of here.